The boy who thought his father's badge made him untouchable. He walked in like he had already won. 23 years old, shoulders back. That particular kind of smirk that isn't just confidence. It's the look of someone who has never once in their life faced a consequence they couldn't walk away from. He sat down, leaned back in his chair, looked around my courtroom like he was deciding whether it was worth his time. And then he looked at me, and he laughed. Not a big laugh, just that small, dismissive sound that certain young men make when they want you to know they don't take you seriously, when they want the room to see that they are above whatever is happening around them. I have been behind this bench for a very long time. I have seen arrogance in every form it comes in. Loud arrogance, quiet arrogance, arrogance wrapped in expensive suits, and arrogance wrapped in excuses. I have seen men 3 times his age sit in that chair and believe they could talk their way past the truth. But there was something specific about this young man that I want you to understand. He was not simply arrogant. He was protected. He had spent his entire life being protected. And that protection had convinced him deep in his bones that the rules that governed everyone else simply did not apply to him. His name was Tyler Boone, and his father was the chief of police. If you believe that a badge, no matter whose father is wearing it, does not place anyone above accountability, please subscribe right now, because what happened in that courtroom is something I will carry with me for a long time. Let me tell you who Tyler was before he ever walked through my door. He grew up in a mid-sized town where his father's name opened every door and closed every complaint. He had been given every advantage, not through any cruelty on his father's part, but through the quiet, accumulated effect of a community that showed deference to the chief's family at every turn. Teachers had given him grace when he didn't earn it. Coaches had kept him on teams when other players would have been cut. Officers who responded to minor incidents involving Tyler had been known to write their reports with generous language. None of this was dramatic. None of it was a conspiracy. It was simply what happens when a person grows up surrounded by people who were careful not to say no to the wrong family. By the time Tyler was 23, he had never truly been told no, not by anyone who mattered, not in any way that stuck. He had come to believe that this was the natural order of things. The case before my court was straightforward on paper. Tyler had been involved in a property dispute with a neighbor, a retired schoolteacher named Miriam Okafor, who had lived on her street for 22 years. Tyler had, over a period of several months, repeatedly used a shared access lane beside her property without permission, damaged a section of her garden fence in the process, and when Miriam had asked him politely to stop, he had responded in a way that I will describe simply as thoroughly disrespectful. When Miriam filed a formal complaint with the town, it went nowhere. She was told it was a civil matter. When she filed a small claims action, Tyler received notice and called someone he knew at the courthouse. The case was rescheduled 3 times. Eventually, it landed on my docket. Miriam arrived early. She sat in her chair with the careful posture of a woman who understood that rooms like this one did not always work in her favor, and who had come prepared to make the strongest case she could anyway. She had brought photographs, written records of every incident, dated and timed, a copy of the original property survey, and a letter from her doctor noting that the stress of the ongoing dispute had contributed to elevated blood pressure over the previous 6 months. She had done everything right. She had been doing everything right for months, and she was sitting there waiting for justice in a situation that had been quietly, informally resisted at every turn. Tyler arrived 12 minutes late. From the moment he sat down, he communicated one thing clearly. He did not believe this was real. Not this courtroom, not this case, not me. He looked at his phone before the session began. He commented to no one in particular that the room was smaller than he expected. When his name was called and I asked him to confirm he understood the nature of the complaint against him, he shrugged and said, "Sure, I understand. Can we make this quick?" I looked at him. I did not respond to the question. I simply looked at him, the way you look at something you are trying to understand completely before you decide what to do about it. He interpreted my silence as uncertainty. He was wrong. I asked Miriam to present her account first. She spoke with the quiet dignity of someone who was rehearsed not for performance, but for clarity. She described the first incident with the fence, how she had noticed the damage on a Sunday morning, how she had knocked on Tyler's door that same afternoon and spoken to him calmly, how he had told her the fence was probably already damaged and walked back inside without another word. She described the second incident, the third, the fourth. Each time she had tried to resolve it directly. Each time she had been dismissed. She described calling the non-emergency line after the fourth incident and speaking to an officer who had been polite, but who had explained that this was a civil matter and there was not much they could do. She did not say the officer knew Tyler's father. She did not need to. The pattern spoke on its own. When she finished, she folded her hands on the table and looked at me with clear, steady eyes. I just wanted to stop, she said. I don't want money. I want to be able to live in my house without being treated like I have no rights. The room was quiet. I nodded at her. Then I turned to Tyler. Mr. Boone, I said, your response. He leaned forward and he smiled. Not a nervous smile, a performing smile. The smile of someone who has decided to turn the room into an audience. Judge, he said, drawing the word out, with all due respect, and I do mean that, this whole thing has been blown way out of proportion. I used Elaine. She got upset. That's it. I've been dragged in here over a fence. Over a fence you damaged, I said. He shrugged. I don't know that I damaged it. You told her the fence was probably already damaged when she came to you. I said it might have been. Are you saying it was already damaged before you used that lane? I'm saying I don't know. I wasn't watching the fence. I wrote something down. He watched me write it. Your relationship with this neighbor, I said, still writing, how would you describe it? He leaned back. Fine. I barely know her. She says she has spoken to you on at least 4 separate occasions about this issue. She's come over a few times, yeah. And how did those conversations end? I told her I'd look into it. And did you? A pause. I was going to. Over how many months? He opened his mouth, closed it. 7 months, Mr. Boone, I said. According to Ms. Okafor's records, this began 7 months ago. He shifted in his chair. This was the moment I had been watching for. The first crack. Not anger, not embarrassment yet, just the small, unfamiliar sensation of being held accountable to a timeline, of having someone ask the next question instead of accepting the first answer. He was not used to this. I could see it in his face. Let me ask you something else, I said. He waited. When Ms. Okafor filed her formal complaint with the town, it was marked as a civil matter and not pursued. Were you aware of that? I didn't have anything to do with that. I'm not suggesting you did, I said. I'm asking if you were aware. Someone might have mentioned it. Someone. I don't remember exactly. I opened a different section of the file. The complaint was filed on a Wednesday. It was marked inactive on that Friday. 2 days. He said nothing. Standard processing time for these complaints in your town is between 2 and 4 weeks, I said. This one was resolved in 2 days. Were you aware of the timeline? I wasn't involved in that process. I understand, I said, but you benefited from it. That landed differently. He had been prepared for accusations of direct wrongdoing. He was not prepared for the quieter, more uncomfortable truth that he had spent his life benefiting from a system that bent around his family's position without him ever having to ask. His expression shifted, not to guilt, not yet, to something more primitive, the discomfort of a person who has never once had to look directly at the way their world actually works. That's not my fault, he said. And for the first time, his voice was not smooth. It had an edge in it, the edge of someone feeling cornered. No, I agreed. It is not your fault that the complaint was processed quickly, but it is your responsibility to understand that it was, and to understand what it cost Ms. Okafor that it was. He looked at Miriam then, briefly, and then away. I want to stop here for a moment, because I think what happened next is the most important part of this story, not for the drama of it, but for what it teaches. Tyler tried one more time. He leaned forward and said, in a voice that was still trying to sound casual, "Judge, my father has dedicated 30 years to this community. I think that deserves some—" "Mr. Boone," I said. He stopped. "Your father's service to this community is real. I do not question it." He nodded, slightly relieved. "But it has nothing to do with this case." The relief left his face. "You are not here because of your father," I said. "You are here because of you. Because of 7 months of ignoring a neighbor's reasonable requests, because of a fence you damaged and never repaired, because of a woman who has had her blood pressure elevated for 6 months because she cannot get relief from a situation that should have been resolved with a single, honest conversation." I looked at him steadily. "Your father's career does not transfer to you. His service does not become your shield. You have to stand on your own. And right now, standing on your own, the record shows a pattern of dismissal and avoidance towards someone who deserved better." Tyler was quiet. For the first time since he had walked through my door, he was truly quiet. Not performing quiet, not strategic quiet, just a young man sitting still, listening. I let the silence last. I ruled in Miriam's favor. Tyler was ordered to pay for the full repair of the fence, verified by an independent contractor. He was ordered to reimburse Miriam's legal preparation costs, and I issued a formal finding that the original complaint had been improperly expedited, which I forwarded to the appropriate oversight office with a recommendation for review. That last part mattered, not to punish anyone specifically, but because patterns need to be named. Because the quiet, comfortable bending of systems around certain families does its damage invisibly, and the only way to address it is to make it visible. Tyler sat through the ruling without speaking. When I finished, I looked at him one more time. "Mr. Boone," I said, "you are 23 years old. You have your whole life ahead of you, and I am not interested in destroying it. But I want you to hear this clearly." He looked up. "The protection you have been given has not made you stronger. It has made you fragile. It has made you a person who does not know how to have a hard conversation, how to repair something he broke, how to face a neighbor honestly. Those are not small things. They are the foundation of a decent life." I paused. "You can build that foundation, but you cannot build it on your father's badge. You have to build it yourself, one honest choice at a time." He said nothing, but he did not look away. Miriam gathered her folder with slow, careful hands after the room began to clear. She stood. She straightened her jacket. I was still at the bench when she looked up. She did not smile. She did not celebrate. She simply nodded, with the particular dignity of a woman who has been patient for a very long time and has finally been answered. I nodded back. That was the whole exchange. It was enough. I heard from my clerk's office 3 weeks later that the fence had been repaired. A contractor had completed the work, and Miriam had confirmed it was done correctly. I also heard, through a follow-up on the oversight referral, that the town had revised its processing procedures for civil complaints to include a mandatory review period and a second signature requirement. A small change, procedural, quiet. But those kinds of changes are where real reform lives, not in grand statements, but in the small adjustments that prevent the next Miriam from spending 7 months fighting for something she should have had resolved in a week. As for Tyler, I do not know what he made of that day. I never do. Not really. People leave my courtroom, and they take the experience with them, and they either grow from it or they don't. That is their choice to make. But I hope he heard what I said to him. Not the ruling, the other part, about the foundation, about building a life on something real. Because I meant it. I was not trying to shame him. I was trying to give him something his protected life had never quite managed to give him. A clear, honest look at who he was and who he still had the chance to become. I want to say something to you now, directly, because this story is not really about Tyler Boone, not at its core. It is about all the Miriams, all the people who do everything right, who document, who ask politely, who follow the proper channels, who absorb months of frustration and stress and sleepless nights, and who still find that the system moves slowly or not at all because someone on the other side of their problem has connections they do not. Those people exist everywhere, in every town, in every kind of dispute, and they deserve someone who will look at the file carefully, who will ask the next question, who will not be impressed by a name or a title or a carefully crafted shrug. That is what this bench is for. Not spectacle, not performance. For the Miriams, for the person who arrives early with their paperwork in order and their hands folded and their eyes clear, having decided to trust one more time that if they do everything right, the truth will matter. The truth will always matter here, not because I am remarkable, but because the work is. This is a courtroom, and in a courtroom, what you have done is more powerful than who your father is, every single time. If this story reminded you that accountability belongs to everyone, leave the word everyone in the comments right now. And if you know someone who has been quietly waiting for the system to work the way it is supposed to, share this with them today, because sometimes people just need to know that someone is still paying attention.